Hey, if you have interest in SOAR and XDR and how these things work together using automation, then definitely stick around for today's video. I've got an expert. I'm going to ask him a lot of questions about how automation enables data-driven SOAR. So I hope you stick around. It's going to be fun. I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber. I want to welcome you to our discussion today. I have my friend David Krasik, who works over at ThreatQuotient. He's a director there. He works on product. And we're going to ask him about data-driven SOAR and related topics, threat intelligence, and things like that. Dave, it's nice to see you. How are you?
Nice to see you too.
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, thank you.
You are a New Yorker, so this was an easy trip over.
That's right.
It's good to see you. So, hey, let's start. Tell us a little bit about ThreatQ. What do you guys do? What's the company focus on?
Yeah, sure. ThreatQuotient is a company that builds products for security operations center users and teams. So we're a security operations platform. And we take disparate data from external sources, so threat intel feeds, as well as internal data, and we combine that data to make it useful, actionable for those teams so they can be more efficient, more effective in their jobs.
So your customers are security experts for the most part?
Yes, it's the folks working in the SOCs, doing investigations, triaging alerts, doing vulnerability management, things like that.
That's awesome. Let's talk about kind of how the company came to be. A lot of people think of you guys kind of in the context of maybe the early roots in threat intelligence and automation. How did that progress? Like, what were some of the early motivations around the company? And then I want to get into what people are doing now. But
absolutely, you're 100% right. The DNA of the company is from the threat intel management side of things. Two individuals on our founding team, Wayne and Ryan, both worked in a security operations center in the defense sector. And so they're kind of at the forefront of having to work with and understand threat intelligence. And they were doing the standard thing of taking the data that they were receiving, trying to figure out how to use it, but they were using Excel spreadsheets, the very basic tools, and not the sort of highly efficient, automated, scalable type of technology that you would hope that you could start to use for those things. So they were using these Excel spreadsheets, and they said, there's a better way to do this. They started building out some tools for themselves and found that their peers started saying, hey, what you guys are doing makes a lot of sense for us too. They saw an opportunity and started to transition this into a company and a product.
In those days, we sort of realized the value of all source too, right? We were all sort of learning in those days. I would imagine that was probably a challenge if you're doing it manually, keeping track of all those feeds and things.
I'm sure, yes. Keeping track of spreadsheets, keeping track of the different sources that are provided, and even the sources themselves, the Intel community providing new data, that was relatively nascent too. So you have a world where there aren't any standard formats around data, there aren't any standard practices around how data should be shared. So it's kind of a mess, and trying to make use of that mess was a real challenge.
I remember, was it Sticks and Taxi became kind of popular in the early days as standards, government kind of driven?
Yeah, I think as people started to build out the products and the technology, they also realized that sharing and collaboration is critical, and standards have always been a way to handle that problem. And Sticks and Taxi are both kind of a data format and a protocol for the sharing of data across various organizations and use cases.
So this, at some point, sort of evolves into more of an orchestration story, right? Where automation, orchestration, I think the acronym SOAR is one that you guys use, and I referenced earlier. Talk to me a little bit about that I almost want to call it a natural evolution from dealing with intelligence to dealing with some things that seem more actionable, like SOAR. Well, how's that gone?
Right. I think that's just an evolution of getting more mature with working with the sets of data that you were able to combine. Initially, the initial challenges were normalizing data, cleaning it up, and just trying to get a situational awareness and understand what is this data telling me as I layer more context into it. And then people started to say, okay, we think we have a better understanding of what this data might be telling us. Now let's be proactive and make it actually actionable. And that means working with other teams within the security organization to push out enforcement, to start to block things that might be critical, to also gather information from other tools that might be providing even more context around what's happening in your environment. And as you do that, you have to have tighter integrations with the various products, tools, and teams. And in order to make that efficient, you have to start to automate those types of things. You can't have one-to-one interactions between 6 different teams that interact with the Security Operations Center or within it. You really need to start to automate and standardize some of those processes. And I think that's where automation came from.
So the thing that drives this is the data, right? So
That's right.
as data comes in, it is interpreted, and the automation helps to direct management decision making. Is that the idea? Like, it's kind of a cool concept, because as the data comes in, you're not entirely sure where things are going. You're actually looking to see what's coming, right?
That's right. So we will ingest data, and if there are commonalities across that data or relationships across that data, we'll build those actually within the data model itself so that they're then usable. You might want to conduct an investigation where you're pivoting across multiple different objects. You have a set of indicators that are related to a malware or an adversary, or a set of tactics and techniques. And you know that those might have a strong relationship to another set of indicators or assets, sightings, vulnerabilities that may be resident within your network itself. So you can start to make this connection between a strategic understanding of what's happening, as well as what people are telling you from a technical perspective, and then also connecting to that what's happening within your network. And being able to do that quickly reduces the time to response, reduces the time to detection, which is obviously a goal of a lot of security operations.
Seems like a lot of teams, at least ones I was associated with, would do that using manually, homegrown things where you hack something together. Have you guys, is that still the case? Do people still try to do this maybe with some homegrown scripts or a little early automation?
Absolutely.
It seemed like a great idea.
I think there's a balance. Some teams are so sophisticated, both in their technical capabilities and in their use cases, that they're able to write scripts or customize the integrations that we have or the automations that we have to be very targeted in what they want to do and more sophisticated in what they want to do. That will always be around. But there is an evolution from those people who are more at the forefront, people who are beginning to mature their security operations center, their intel operations, are looking for more of the sort of canned automations, things that are more, not necessarily cookie cutter, but more standardized type of operations and automations. So that's less tailored towards scripting, and they don't have to have all of the overhead related to managing that. They don't have to have the technical skill set to have to code and maintain code associated with those automations. It's available for them, and they can focus on the things that they want to focus on, which is more of the actual specific Intel use cases rather than the mechanics of how something is actually processed or automated.
Let's think about, so the data comes in, needs to be analyzed. I would imagine there must be some frameworks, like would MITRE ATT&CK be useful, things like that in the interpretation, or maybe there are other frameworks. Was that one of the things that you guys are doing with this data?
Absolutely. MITRE ATT&CK is both a solid Intel data source, so it tells you some information about threat actor groups and malware, but it also gives you a framework for characterizing, categorizing different events and activity based on the tactics, techniques, and procedures that may be in use. And so you can start to understand behaviorally what might be happening with a threat or with a specific breach or attack. And then you can gather patterns associated with that. You can have people who have worked on things that show that behavior before, and that helps them better respond to it. And you can also learn what are the types of behaviors that adversaries are trying to use when they target our specific organization. And so we're able to make correlations, make connections to those MITRE ATT&CK techniques, tactics, and procedures to help them describe that behavior of the things they're seeing in their network.
It's like a translation where you take data to information to intelligence to action, sort of like that. I mean,
Absolutely.
Imagine that's how someone might describe the role of a SOC, right? The whole point. You have a bunch of data coming in. It could be a bunch of crap, or it could be really important.
Absolutely true. I think the data is foundational to the operation of the SOC. I come from a military background. The concept of the OODA loop, where you observe, orient, detect, act, decide, act. The observe and orient piece is really collecting all of the data, getting a strong situational awareness and understanding of your environment before you actually take action and make decisions. The more you can invest in that side of the operation, the more effective and the quicker you can make those decisions and act on them. And so we believe that within Security Operations Center, focusing on that data piece, rich contextual data that informs really targeted decisions is where the value's at.
Yeah, there could be a ton of noise, I would imagine, in there, right? That's part of that whole front-end processing, I would imagine, right? In fact, probably a lot more noise than signal.
Absolutely, it's a huge problem that we deal with and our customers and users deal with, in that as the market has matured, more and more providers of threat intelligence have grown into the market to try to meet that need, which means more and more volumes of data that can and are being consumed by the Security Operations Center. And not only is it more providers, but over time you build up this historical record where more and more data becomes useful, and looking back in time is also still valuable. So you're sifting through millions, billions of different objects to try to figure out what's right. And that can cause a lot of complexity. So being able to filter down to just what you care about is incredibly important to sift through that noise. And from an automation perspective, because automation can also increase the overall volume of data, gives you access to more data about more things, you get an alert, you want to enrich it, that may not be useful data that you're actually consuming if you just have a not very smart set of automations. So you might be actually amplifying the problem through automation, whereas automation should really be targeted at helping solve that problem, reduce the noise.
Yeah, it's funny, while you're talking, I'm thinking about SOC. This capability strikes me as pretty applicable to incident response, vulnerability management, threat hunting. I know these are all ancillary or even adjacent to the SOC, but it seems like it'd almost be hard to find things that wouldn't connect up with this kind of data-driven analysis. Am I reading that right? Like, this seems way broader than just the Security Operations Center. I mean, still the operations teams, but do I have that right?
I think ultimately that's correct. It goes back to this concept of situational awareness and connecting technical indicators, the things that all of those teams and tools work with at sort of the atomic level, bringing them together in that holistic story and understanding, who are the people, who are the teams that are actually trying to target us, and that targeting, those threats, attacks, usually span more than just a single team or a single target within a network. They might be doing lateral movement within a network. They might be hitting touch points and systems within the network that are the responsibility of multiple teams. So being able to fuse and connect that data across some sort of common set of language is incredibly important, I think, to kind of get to the next level of these teams understanding and be able to respond faster.
Who are the customers you guys deal with? Is it government, commercial, big, small, large? What's a sense of your sweet spot customer here?
Yeah, I think we sort of lean more towards the larger customers, just because they're the ones who are both generating and consuming more data and have the teams that can support doing some of this deeper strategic analysis and technical analysis. As far as sector and types of companies, it kind of spans the whole set out there. We definitely have a competency in federal governments or local governments, but also large organizations as well, large commercial companies. And also we work with service providers.
Yeah. Let's talk future here a little bit. What are some things that are strategically on the roadmap? You work in product.
Yeah, absolutely.
You probably have some really cool things you're looking at. Is it AI? Is it cloud? What are the things on the horizon?
I think we're trying to be a little bit more practical. There's a lot of the sort of marketing side of things which may get ahead of yourself sometimes. I think because this data challenge is so vast, I think the industry in general is really just starting to get a good grasp of that, consolidating around data standards and processes. So I think that's kind of the phase we're in. I think we're at a point where we're starting to transition into these more complex automation and analytics capabilities, but very much in the early stages of it. So we're getting to a point where data can be well normalized in an automated fashion. Users can start to gather insights from it, but they need to start to build more confidence over actually using that in an automated, proactive fashion and doing more detailed analytics around it. I think from a machine learning type of standpoint, right now this isn't a world where we can just let an algorithm run and do all the work for you, and I'm not sure that we're ever going to get to that point. I think we're at a point where we're finding targeted areas where you can augment users' workflows with things like machine learning to help pull data points out of stacks of text, to help give them suggestions about next actions to take, but not really removing them from the loop or from the picture. I don't believe that will ever happen. So I think we're at that point where we're starting to transition to some of those augmented pieces, but not at the point where things are just running on their own.
I always think automation is best for the things that you can define, that are repeatable.
Right.
There's no reason for human beings to ever do that. You know, if something can be, if I can draw a schema that explains how a thing can happen, and I think there's still a lot of security operations centers today that do things procedurally that could be automated. I mean, that would be my guess. I'm going to guess moving forward as you guys continue to grow.
Absolutely.
That just about every one of your customers will use you to just make everybody more productive, I would think.
That's the goal. Yeah, the idea is try to not force, but allow the users to work on those more high leverage decision points.
Yeah.
All the other pieces, the sort of rote, steps, clicks, and things like that, remove those from their view, allow them to think, focus on the hard problems.
That's great. Hey, you enjoy doing the product job?
I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. Yeah. What brought you to product management?
I think it's just a great combination of technology and business, and you get to engage with customers and you get to engage with the engineering team and kind of be that, glue and communication between the two and sort of help move the product forward. I really enjoy looking and saying, what do our users want? How are we going to help make them happy and solve their problems? And translate that into requirements that I can work with great talented engineers to actually bring into the real world and create something new.
Product managers are always good communicators, and you're very good at that. You have a good, easy way of describing things. When we bring developers in, sometimes they're all over the map. So I think you're in the right job.
I appreciate that.
Keep up the good work.
Thank
Well,
you.
listen, appreciate everything you do. What you guys do at ThreatQ helps keep us nice and safe. So please keep doing it. And I hope people watching will give you guys a call.
Great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful to see you. For everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.